Cool.
Alright. Well, I guess I'll get this started then. So, today I'm gonna be pitching the matchup of Zelda from The Legend of Zelda versus Nina from Breath of Fire.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Oh, Breath of Fire. Whoa.
So,
Coming with the Sega.
so I think we probably all know who Zelda is by now. She's got
Exactly.
her own legend and everything. She's is in the name. But that brings up the question then, who is Nina? So, Nina is one of two recurring protagonists of Breath of Fire, a Capcom JRPG franchise. The other protagonist being Ryu, not the one from Street Fighter, that's a different Capcom Ryu. Nina tends to vary from game to game because each Nina is usually a different incarnation, though they do tend to share a few traits aside from the name. Usually being a master of most forms of magic, and also having wings that tie her to the Fae or Wing Clan, depending on the localization. So, on that note of various incarnations, that's kind of the core theme of the matchup. It's a simple one, but a core aspect of who they are, that throughout their franchises, both of them are ever evolving, essentially. They're never static. They're different characters in each game, pretty much.
Yeah.
You'll see that in the fight too, but we'll get to that in just a bit.
Yeah. So that brings me then to the question of, can Zelda fight? Well, despite her past history of originally having been the classic damsel in distress, over the past few years, Zelda's actually become quite the fighter in her own right, especially in more recent entries such as Age of Calamity, Age of Imprisonment, and Echoes of Wisdom. So what can she do then? Well, in the past, Zelda used to mostly focus on magic for sealing, casting shields, or teleportation. She has a bit of an association with swordsmanship and archery, but she originally didn't demonstrate it much. This would change starting with Age of Calamity, where Zelda actually demonstrates skill with the Sheikah Slate runes, such as bombs, stasis, magnesis, cryonis, and a camera that just makes anyone that it takes pictures of explode. And Age of Imprisonment would go even further, allowing her to utilize more of her magic side with things like a light sword, light projectiles, and creating traps of light on the ground. And then in her most recent outing, Echoes of Wisdom, Zelda gained quite a few new tools. She has the Sword of Might, which briefly lets her transform into Link and gain some of his abilities, and more notably, the Tri-Rod. The Tri-Rod grants Zelda the ability to create echoes, which can range from inanimate objects to, more notably, enemies she's defeated in battle. These can be obviously weaker enemies such as Octoroks, Dekubabas, and Keese. Then there are more powerful enemies such as Armor Knights and Wizrobes, and some of the biggest powerhouses in the franchise such as the Lynels. So, with that settled, I'd like to talk about the dynamic a bit, which is probably best explained by splitting it into three segments: the start of the fight, the middle of the fight, and the climax. The start of the fight would ideally focus on how Zelda tends to fight in the Breath of the Wild timeline, while Nina would just, in general, likely spend the fight utilizing her various spells and a bit of her rapier that she has in Breath of Fire 1. For Zelda, this would mostly consist of the Sheikah Slate runes, the Blade of Light, and various light magic spells, mostly to keep it simple at the beginning. This is because I think things would get a bit chaotic at the midpoint, where the fight would go into Hyrule Castle, limiting Nina's mobility, but also Zelda would start making more use of her Echoes of Wisdom tools, obviously including the Sword of Might, but more notably the various echoes of enemies that she can summon. With Zelda constantly being able to pressure Nina with so many enemies, this also gives Nina an excuse to throw out her large array of spells. She has various elemental spells, for example, which could be used to exploit enemy weaknesses, or maybe against something as powerful as a Lynel, she could even try and gamble with, say, an insta-kill spell. And then to transition smoothly into the climax of the fight, I kind of like the idea of Zelda utilizing the light arrows to clash with Nina utilizing the electric spell Mjolnir, which would create a massive explosion that could knock both of them backwards. And then comes the big thing that I like of this matchup, and probably the first thing I ever thought of with this. It would technically just be your standard beam struggle, with Zelda utilizing her full power light magic and a beam, and Nina utilizing the fire wind spell Sirocco. But where I think things would get really interesting is that as the beams clash, you could see both of them start to manifest spirits of their various incarnations behind them, empowering them even further, well beyond their limits even. And that's kind of fun because it ties back to the core theme, their whole incarnations aspect. This is kind of the type of visual for the climax that I would envision, sort of, with their whole incarnations.
Kind of like Mega Man's Final Smash and Smash Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, as far as who would probably win in that clash, it's weird. It mostly does just come down to who you consider to be stronger. Nina has a massive edge in versatility because JRPG mage, she has a lot of spells.
Yeah.
And Zelda is surprisingly faster if you're willing to scale her to Link, as Death Battle episodes have already put Link at, if I'm remembering correctly, around 10% the speed of light, whereas the highest Nina could scale to is around Mach 500.
Yeah, something like that.
So the debate basically becomes, do you buy Universal Legend of Zelda, since any of the planetary or continental stuff in The Legend of Zelda tends to get a bit outdone by what Nina would scale to normally in power. But then comes the final big question I like to bring up, which is, are they big enough to get an episode? And I think the answer is yes. Zelda is obviously one of Nintendo's flagship franchises and has multiple upcoming projects, such as the live-action film and the recently announced Ocarina of Time remake. And Breath of Fire has a scary strong cult following behind it. To demonstrate this, back in 2024, Capcom held a popularity poll containing several categories, and Breath of Fire placed in the top 10 of multiple categories. Some of the ones I was able to find were Nina placed among Japan's top 10 most popular female characters that Capcom's created. In Japan, Breath of Fire 3 was voted to be among the top 10 most popular Capcom games ever created. And the big one is the top 10 most popular Capcom franchises. Both in worldwide and Japan, Breath of Fire beat out the Capcom Versus series, but also what interested me was that in Japan, Breath of Fire beat out another major juggernaut of Capcom, that being the Funny Dante series, Devil May Cry. So that's kind of most of what I had for this. If you guys have any questions, though, about the matchup, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I'm so glad to get a Breath of Fire match.
I've played
like a series
4 in
Yeah,
like 2003, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm old, but yeah. Man, I really like that game from everything I remember. But they say that is the same Nina, right? So it is just that same thing of like they go forward every time, much like it. So thematically, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I don't know anything about the modern Breath of Fires.
The interesting thing with that is that, yeah, each Nina is kind of a different one. The only thing that kind of ever connects them is the first two games have a weird sort of connection with time travel, where the Nina from Breath of Fire 1 goes back in time and gets trained by the Nina from Breath of Fire 2 goes back in time and gets trained by the Nina from Breath of Fire 1 a bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. From what I know, also, I think it was Breath of Fire 6 was kind of weirdly exclusive to Japan, from what I remember, because that's when Capcom was kind of starting to shift away to just their more like Street Fighter, Resident Evil era.
Right.
Yeah. But
Well, cool. It's a great idea.
yeah.
It's really unique. Zelda doesn't get too many matchups, but so it's cool to see like ones that are just not really covered. And Breath of Fire is of course like an iconic, classic series. It'd be great to bring on sometime.
And I do think it'd also just be fun to see like some of these like niche types of franchises get more of a spotlight.
Yeah, totally.
At least niche as far as the Versus community is concerned.
Yeah.
Is 6 the last Breath of Fire game so far in the
yes.
franchise?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Capcom
pretty much.
has been asked if they would be interested in making a newer one, and their answer is essentially always a sort of, not at the moment. We feel like there's too much competition in the JRPG genre.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Fingers crossed for a 7 then. Maybe that'll help us.
Oh,
Everybody
I
loves a
love
7 of a
that.
title anyways. They're very strong.
Yeah, who knows?
They
Maybe
tend
the
to be.
Death Battle Curse could make that happen.
Yeah. I'm just reading a little bit about Nina, but it does seem to make a lot of sense. I like it a lot, and I think, like Liam said, it's really cool to see a matchup for Zelda we haven't seen before, because, there's not a lot already, and it's a pretty interesting one. I don't got much else besides that. Makes me want to replay Breath of Fire 4. Thank you so much for supporting the show.
Always happy to.
We can't
Glad to be
can't
helped.
say how much. This is awesome. Thank you so much. Please go ahead and share this with us so we can keep tabs on it. If you want to share your presentation with deathbattlechaos@gmail.com, that would be sick, so we can look back on it, answer any questions ourselves. But really appreciate it, y'all. Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you very much.